Okay, when you come to the Gettysburg National Military Park, one of the tour stops that you will come to and during your automobile tour is the Farnsworth Cavalry Charge of July 3rd, 1863. This was a part of General Elon J. Farnsworth's brigade, which consisted of the 1st Vermont, the 5th New York, and the 18th Pennsylvania Cavalry. And this, when you come to this stop, you see two waysides over here off the road. One talks about the wounded and the dead, and the other one's the action of Farnsworth's cavalry charge. And they're placed here in front of this field where our camera's in. However, because of a stake that was placed in the ground wrong by Colonel John Hammond of the 5th New York Cavalry, in 1887, he placed a stake in the ground where the 5th New York Cavalry Monument was to be dedicated and erected. And because he was mistaken where he put his stake, the two other regiments, the 1st Vermont and the 18th Pennsylvania Cavalry, would also place monuments on the Gettysburg battlefield in the same brigade line in the wrong area. And it would forever affect the way the Battle of Farnsworth's Charge was interpreted, and also meaning that the waysides and the field that are generally considered to be for Farnsworth's Charge are probably in the wrong spot. In our next series of videos that we do, called A Monumental Mistake, we are going to talk about the placing of the one stake in the ground where the first monument was erected and how it affected the rest of the interpretation of the battle. This has been A Monumental Mistake on Gettysburg Battlefield Facebook. Okay, this is going to be A Monumental Mistake at Gettysburg, Part 2. On our last part, we talked about the story of Farnsworth's Charge, the three cavalry units that were part of Elon J. Farnsworth's brigade, and the stake that was placed in the ground by Colonel John Hammond of the 5th New York Cavalry here in 1887. And by placing his stake in the ground in the wrong spot, and then a monument 1 year later being dedicated, it put the entire brigade line off in the pages of the history books, as other two regiments would later place monuments within Confederate lines and a little further to the north than they should have been. Unfortunately, the park doesn't interpret this action correctly in its waysides, or do they talk very little about the original placing of the stake or the monument back here in 1887 and 1888 respectively. So I've done a little bit of research here, and I've cleared the way, and I'm going to take you to one of the secrets of the battlefield, which is the original location of the 5th New York Cavalry's monument here on the western slope of Big Round Top. Now, a little bit of background why this mistake happened. When Hammond placed this stake in the ground here, it was still not the Gettysburg National Military Park. And regiments would place their stakes in the ground, and then there were certain rules that it had to abide by. Now, also in the late 1880s, early 1890s, there was disputes between a lot of other regiments with monuments. The 72nd Pennsylvania. Of course, there was the dispute with the Gettysburg Electric Railway, which we did an 18-part video series on. So right around the time that this is happening, the John Bouchowder and the park are experiencing problems with other wrong monuments as well as encroachment on the battlefield. And this gets put on the back burner, and that's why later, as the veterans died off, the monuments were never changed and can never be changed today because there is no one here alive to place a marker. So what I've done is I've located the position of the rock where the 5th New York Cavalry's monument was. It's in the woods. It's in this woods here, and as you can see, it's very, very thick. There's a lot of stickers, poison ivy, spider webs, you know, snakes and whatever, and there isn't a path that leads to it. So I was able to clear a slight path, and I'm going to show you how to get there if you want to come and visit. Back there where you see my car parked is just to the right of my car would be the path that leads to the Vermont Monument, which is a stone dirt path that you can go to that you'll see in our upcoming video, and it sits back in here where the sun is shining. In this direction to the north, where you see that car moving now and about to turn the corner, that is the big round top parking area. Now if you park your car where I have mine parked and you walk about halfway up here, on the right hand side you're going to see a drain right here on the ground. You'll want to look for this drain. Then across the street from the drain you're going to see two trees, rather large ones, that are standing next to one another. And what I've done is I've cut a path today, starting using these trees as a reference point. I got a stick and beat back some of the stickers and brush, and I've carved a path out. It's about 25 yards off of South Confederate Avenue. And as you can see on the ground here is where I kind of chopped away a small path. So if you guys want to come back here and visit, you'll know exactly how to find it now. And as we make our way back here, you'll want to look for a fallen tree and then a tree behind it standing, and then you'll see the boulder that was carved and flattened right here is the spot where the 5th New York Cavalry placed their monument here on July 3rd of 1888. And this is the key to understanding the mistake that was made. Understanding the mistake that was made here by placing the 5th New York's monument here. Therefore, when the other two regiments would come and place their monuments in the year afterward, they would also place them in the brigade line, which was marked incorrectly. So this is the spot where Colonel John Hammond of the 5th New York placed a stake in the ground to mark a spot for a monument in 1887 that was erected on July 3rd, 1888. It was actually about a half a mile from where his regiment was positioned during the Battle of Gettysburg. And his positioning, of course, is part of General Elon J. Farnsworth's brigade of the 1st Vermont, 5th New York, and 18th Pennsylvania Cavalry. So this is Secrets of the Battlefield and a Monumental Mistake, Part 2, on Gettysburg Battlefield Facebook. Standing here on South Confederate Avenue, and to give you an idea where we come from, the Bushman Farm is in this direction. When you take the Emmitsburg Road to South Confederate Avenue, it comes across and then it bends right here. And in that little marker there to the left of that tree is the extreme end of the Confederate line. When you come down, you're going to see a parking area right here where my car is parked. And here in front of us would be Bushman Hill. And this is going to be a monumental mistake, part 3. And we're going to talk about the positioning of the 18th Pennsylvania Cavalry's monument, which now is also being placed in the wrong spot due to the 5th New York Cavalry placing their monument wrong in 1888. Now, the 18th Pennsylvania was dedicated September 11th of 1889 on Bushman Hill, and though it's closer to the area where the actual Farnsworth charge was made, it's still in the wrong position. Thankfully, the 5th New York was the only one of the 3 cavalry regiments to correct their monument, so we can correctly place the battle line. The battle line on July 3rd of 1863 would have been the 5th New York, and then over this way would have been the 1st Vermont Cavalry, and then the 18th would have been over here, meaning that Farnsworth's charge would have been coming in this direction here, not far from the Bushman Farm, crossing Plum Run as they came off the rocky hill, which is Bushman Hill. not the western slope of Little Round Top as the waysides. Now let's take a walk so I can show you now where the 18th Pennsylvania Cavalry's monument's at. If you take this little trail here that has this little marker on the side, it's going to be a little rock wall line trail. Sometimes during the damp weather it can be very wet and muddy back here. But as we get up to the top here, you're going to see a marker here for Kilpatrick and Kilpatrick's Cavalry Corps of the 3rd Division. And you're going to make the left where it splits. You're going to go past Brigadier General Judson Kilpatrick's monument, which we're coming up to now, and then up the hill. And again, this is the original hill that the colonel was recollecting in his mind but got wrong. This is Bushman Hill, named after the Bushman property, which we did a video on earlier in the year. And here it is. This is the monument to the 18th Pennsylvania Cavalry, dedicated on September 11th, 1889. It's very often not visited, and it's kind of off the beaten path. This has been a monumental mistake, Part 3 on Gettysburg. This is a monumental mistake, Part 4 on Gettysburg Battlefield Facebook. We're here off of South Confederate Avenue, which is just over here in the distance, and we're walking on this dirt trail, which will take us over to the 1st Vermont Cavalry Monument. This monument, after the mistake of the 5th New York Cavalry, which was dedicated on July 3rd of 1888, and then the second monument of this brigade, which was the 18th Pennsylvania, which was dedicated on September 11th, 1889. This monument here was dedicated on October the 9th, 1889, making it the third mistake caused by the misplacing of the stake of the 5th New York Cavalry. Now, the problem with the monument and all the monuments that were mistakenly put here is they fall on the western side of what is South Confederate Avenue in their distance. On July 3rd, 1863, this was actually Confederate burial lines, I'm sorry, Confederate battle lines. The 5th New York marker, which we took a look at the boulder, is about 320 yards in the distance in the woods in front of us. That was the monument that was dedicated on July 3rd, 1888, misplaced by a stake that Colonel John Hammond had put in the ground. And when that happened, the brigade line got marked here, here, and then beyond in the distance by the 18th Pennsylvania, instead of being moved further to the east and south, which also messes up the entire interpretation of Farnsworth's charge on July the 3rd, 1863, here on the southern end of the battlefield. So this is the wrong position for the 1st Regiment of Vermont Cavalry, 1st Brigade, 3rd Division Cavalry Corps, who fought near here on July 3rd, 1863, as members of Elon J. Farnsworth's brigade during the action of Farnsworth's charge. This has been Part 4 of a monumental mistake on Gettysburg Battlefield Facebook.